Hey guys, well you know what this means. That's right, it means it's time for another carburetor video. I thought on this video I would talk about different kinds of 4-barrel carburetors. I've got here on the table 4 examples of the most common and most popular carburetors, 4 barrels that you'll see these days. There are others. There's more older carburetors, a couple older carburetors that I'm not going to show here. I'm not going to demonstrate them, but these are the most common. So if you're kind of a novice at carburetors and carburetions and hot rods and things like that, this will give you kind of a little visual outline of how to tell what you're looking at, make it a little bit easier for you. Now what we have here is just a general example of each type of carburetor. They're all 4 barrels. There may be slight differences between particular models of these carburetors. There may be different, of course there's different Quadrajets, Holleys are different, things like that, but essentially they're all going to be relatively the same, so you won't have much of a problem telling what you got. So let's start over here at the right side here at this end, and this is a Holley carburetor. This is a Holley 4-barrel. I'll stand up and give you a look down at it here. This is the primaries where I have my finger in the choke plate. This is the secondaries. This is one of a kind of a hallmark of this and an Edelbrock is that you have these exposed rear Venturi on these type of carburetors. There's no kind of flap or a door or anything like that on them. Does have the fuel inlet at the right front. Some of them may have it going straight out, maybe kind of angled down, something like that. But that's generally the area where the fuel inlet will be. You have a front bowl that bolts on right here. It's got 4 screws, bolts, whatever you want to call it. Right here, there's also a rear. This looks the same. So it's dual float bowls. It's got a transfer tube over here on the left. It basically does exactly what it sounds like. It transfers fuel from the front to the rear bowls. So there are 2 floats on these. These are your float adjustments. You loosen this nut and turn this screw up or down to adjust your float. Here. Over here you got, this is your, all this is just a bolt that unbolts, and this is, you use this when you're setting the float height. You have the engine running. It's not really a safe thing to do, but that's how they have you do it. You set your float height and you want it just where it's just maybe barely seeping out this hole right here. Now you also can buy these clear sight plugs that go in place of these, so you don't have to do that little ordeal. You can just see it without having to take that plug out. So let's look on the right side of this carburetor. Let's turn it around here. And one thing you'll notice here, this is a vacuum secondary Holley. It's got this is a vacuum chamber right here. And underneath, if you kind of peek in there, sorry the lighting's not the best, but you've got a rod that comes out of there. So I'm not totally familiar with Holleys. I don't use Holleys, but this vacuum chamber operates one way or the other, so this will move to engage the secondaries down at the bottom when you punch it. And over here you have this is probably a timed vacuum port. This is probably for your distributor advance or EGR if you have it. Down here, this is your mixture adjustment screw, idle mixture. One thing I want to point out right here, I told you got a float bowl right here on this. This is your float bowl cover. This part, you see the part that it's separate. This is the rest of the carburetor body here, and then this is this. But you see in between where this port and this mixture screw is, that's what's called a metering block on these Holley carburetors. It's just to make it simple, it's just it's where you got your jets and things like that. You can change jets in them. metering, you know, think about the word metering fuel. So that's basically what this is. This is where your jets and things like this, once you take this off, where they'll be located at. Now this one has got a mixture screw on either side of it in the same place generally. It's got one over here on the driver's side as well, so you adjust both of those, because like I said, on a 2-barrel or 4-barrel you got 2 primaries. So you do that. But this is what's called a single metering. This has a single metering block on it. Some of them may have one on the back also, but this one doesn't. You see how the float bolt cover just back here just bolts straight directly to the carb body. And one last thing to help you identify, this is what's called a, don't mind the dead insects under here, it looks terrible. This is what's called a square bore carburetor. Why is it called square bore? Because look at this, these Venturis here. You notice they're all the same size, and they're, if you drew a line, you know, on the outside edges of all of them, it would make a square. So that's what that is. And by the way, this is your accelerator pump under here. These carbs are somewhat similar to Autolite 2300s and 4100s, but not, you can get those mixed up, but they're not that close. They're similar, but not exactly. One other thing to help you identify this one. Now this is a factory equipped Holley, which means it's not an aftermarket carburetor. Look on the front of it right here. See what it says? It says manufactured by Holley for Motorcraft. So that means this carburetor came on like a Ford truck, some kind of Ford truck, or I know it's not on a Mustang. Mustang's like 385, 83, 4, and 5 used carburetor, a lot like this, but this is not. I don't think this is one of them. It could be. I haven't run the numbers on this. It's always possible. So come on, look at one thing on the back here. Let's see, yeah. There's the cast-in name on the rear float bowl cover. So there you go. There's a Holley. I'll set this on down, give us a little bit more working room. Now here we are to our old friend the Quadrajet. You've seen one of these in many of my carburetor videos. I like Quadrajets. They're just a good carburetor, good all-around carburetor. A lot of people don't like them for various reasons, real or imagined, but I like them. They're not the horrible thing to rebuild that a lot of people think they are. They're not as easy to tune as a Holley, I'll give you that, but they're quite a good carburetor. Now then, one thing you can always tell a Quadrajet is it has these air door flaps on the back. I've shown you that before in these carburetor videos. I've explained how this all works, but it's an air door carburetor. So this ties into the metering, secondary metering system. It's all just a one-piece carburetor body. It does not have anything separate like a Holley. There's nothing that comes off this. The only thing that comes off is the top plate, the air horn here, and then down here at the bottom you've got a well, this is just your base plate. So, and as I've shown you before, your metering screws on a idle metering screws, adjustment screws, are right here on the front in the base plate. Should be one if I hadn't borrowed it. No, it's in there. There it is. And then of course you always got choke housing over here. This is somebody has converted this to a manual choke. This is a little kit you can get, but I'm not going to tell you how to do that. And then of course choke housing here. Of course over here you can always see it's got the name on the side of it. Can't hardly miss that. Rochester Quadrajet. You'll have your ID number here on the side, up and down vertically. And sometimes you'll see these, they have a side inlet like this one, or they'll have a straight ahead inlet. There's no real difference except that different divisions use different inlets. Chevrolet and Cadillac used the side inlet, and Pontiac and Buick and Oldsmobile used a front inlet. So there, you know, no real, well, what I say, Buick, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, That's the 3 of them, that's right. So those are 3 that use that. Now if there's one thing that will immediately clue you into a Quadrajet, it's this bottom. Here's the bottom of it. Here's my thumb is by the primaries, and then look at these huge secondaries. Now this obviously is not going to be a square bore carburetor, because I told you on that carburetor how to tell if it's a square bore. Remember, if it was a square bore, you could draw a square around each of these, maybe make a square. Well, look at these, there's no way. This is what's called a spread bore carburetor, which means it gets narrow. Well, it starts out narrow over here, and then it spreads out around these huge secondaries. That's what makes this good sound when you kick it on these. So should be no mistake in a Quadrajet. So I'll put that down there. Now here's a carburetor that a lot of you have not seen much of. They're actually a good carburetor, but they're just not common anymore. You see a lot more of them on restored cars than you do on anything else. It's kind of a crazy looking carburetor. But this is a Carter Thermoquad. This was started showing up about 1971. They use these on 340 Dusters and Darts, and then they got into big blocks and motorhomes and vans and stuff like that. So this, in theory, this shares a lot with a Quadrajet, the design of this carburetor. But you ever take one apart, it's nowhere near the same inside at all. It's got dual floats. There's one here, one here. I've actually got this thing turned around the wrong way. It looks crazy. It's hard to remember which way to turn it. Well, this is the front of it. See, it looks as wacky from the front as it does from the rear. But this is your choke plate up here. Now this one's an air door carburetor like the Quadrajet. So, but it works similar in design, but it's not quite the same. And I'm not going to take this carburetor apart right now to show you how all that works, but it's pretty similar regardless. You have idle mixture screws in the base plate up here. Now we'll again come to another Carter carburetor here in a second that's a lot like this, but that's what these are. And then you probably got some PCV ports and vacuum ports and things like that here. You got a choke pull off here. Another choke pull off back here. This is probably controls the damper for the secondary doors. This one does. I can see the linkage on it. But there's one thing about this carburetor that's immediately going to stand out here when I show you, that you're going to know that this is a Thermoquad. Look at the body on this carburetor. You see how it's black? You have an aluminum base plate and an aluminum air horn, but then what's this in the center? Well, this is actually a plastic carburetor. This body is made out of high strength plastic. I don't know, it's kind of similar possibly to Bakelite, but it's not Bakelite, I don't believe. So that's the deal on this. This is immediately identifies one of these carburetors. The reason that they did this was to combat fuel boiling and things like that. They want to try to keep the carburetor cool, the fuel cool in here. So that's what they did the plastic thing for, and they hold up good. You think at first, you think, good Lord, a plastic carburetor, seriously? But they work fine. Like I said, I hardly have any experience with one of these. I don't run one on anything. I don't plan to. It's not that they're a bad carburetor, but I think they're a little bit more finicky than the other carburetors. And I would guess that there's not many people that really know right offhand how to tune one of these. But if you've got like a 71, 72, possibly on up 73 Duster or Dart, something like that, it's got a 340 in, you would have one of these carburetors. Possibly not a 71, I'm not sure the cutoff day, but cutoff year, excuse me. Let's look at the bottom of it. Now here again, here's another square bore. Excuse me guys, sorry about that, it's getting late. This is a spread bore. You can correct me there. This is a spread bore carburetor, just like the Quadrajet. It's got these huge secondaries and small primaries. So it's got good throttle response, and then when you kick the gas down, it's going to suck some air. And they sound good too. Now, I meant to show you where to find the carburetor numbers on these. Now, a lot of these use tags that screwed onto the top of the carburetor. At least the old one did, and they always got lost. But I think these they started putting the numbers on the base plate. So let's take a look around in here and see if we can spot a number. Yep, here it is. It's not easy to see, but look right there. 9342S. I know that's a Carter number because it's got that S on the end of it. Now, this is the back of the carburetor, so it's going to be the left rear corner. Now here, the last one, this is going to be a lot of people's old standby, your old buddy here. This is the McDonald's Happy Meal of carburetors. Not saying they're bad, but this is a common carburetor. If you can't make anything else work, you can make one of these work. At least that's the theory. This is an Edelbrock 1406 600. I think this is a 600 carburetor. This is one you can buy at every corner parts store. You can buy them at Summit, you can buy them at Jegs, you can buy them at J.C. Whitney probably. But like I said, that's not a bad thing necessarily. They're a good adaptable carburetor. One thing, of course, if you miss the name on the front of it that says Edelbrock right there, then the tip off is going to be these two screws right in the front. These are your mixture screws for the idle. A lot like that Thermoquad I just showed you down there. This is Carter and that's Carter. Well, this ain't a Carter anymore. It started out as one. It used to be, I think this was an AFB. It started out way a long time ago as AFB. Got fuel in it here. I believe this one, I hadn't had this one apart, but I think it's got dual floats on it. That looks like it's got a fuel transfer across the back right here. That's to keep the gas fresh in each side and level. It's got the exposed secondaries like the Holley did. It's another tip off. So it's not an air door carburetor. It's just a, you know, it works that a different way. This one has an electric choke on it. As you can see right here, it's got two wire terminals. One's a ground, this is your ground, and one is a positive that you would hook to key on power. And then down here, just like the Thermoquad, there's our number. This is a 1406, and that's just probably a casting date 2004-9. Not a clue when this is, how to read those. That might be a 10,000 day calendar, and if it is, they're really hard to figure out. But this one's got to be gone through. I'm going to put this one on my Dart out there and use it because it was free, so why not? And look on the bottom. This is a square bore carburetor. If you look at it, you can tell that these are just, the secondaries on these are just a smidgen larger than the primaries, but they still count as a square bore. See how the gasket is square? So, you know, that's just how that is, even if it is a little bit larger. But yeah, there you go, guys. That should be a primer on how to tell these different carburetors. Let's see if we can find the number on that Holley. I think I know where it's at, but let's take a look here. Usually, well, it's a heavy carburetor. Usually they're on the air horn somewhere. Well, let's peer in here and look and see. Oh yeah, I see it right there. Alright, take a gander. It says list 1850-2. So that's your number. This is 1850-2. And I think I looked this up and it came out to something like a 70s truck. This was a truck, I believe a truck carburetor. And that 2802, that's like another date code, and I'm sorry I'm not familiar enough with those to tell you how to decode that. I need to look that up. Maybe I'll do that one day. But the carburetors usually all got a date code on them. So the Quadrajet does, and all the Carters and that like that. So anyway, let me give you a shot, an upper shot of this Holley beside this Edelbrock, because this could confuse you a little bit. Just remember that a Holley has a float bowl cover, a metering block, and mixture adjustment screws, one on each side. Some of them have them all the way around. That's called a 4-corner mixture system. This Edelbrock does not have any kind of that. It's like a Rochester. It has just a removable air horn and the main body and all that. So, plus this is a tip off. Now, if you see a Holley doesn't have one of these, that doesn't mean anything except that it's just it's a mechanical secondary. That means that anytime you hit the gas wide open, it's going to open the 4 barrels, no matter what. And some people like that. It does have its uses. And then you also may see a Holley that, this is probably what people used to call, they used to call these single line Holleys, I think. But there's a Holley that you'll see them has got a fuel inlet here. It's got one back at the back. That's just a dual line Holley. That doesn't really mean a lot. They've got a dual line Holley, and then you may hear people say, well, a double pumper Holley. I've heard that a lot, and I'm not intently familiar with those, but I think that just means that it's got 2 accelerator pumps on it. Now, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but that's, those are pretty serious carburetors. They're more than what you'd probably want for a street car. And I'm not gonna, since I don't know that much about Holleys, I'm not gonna get into much about them. So I'll probably come through and do a video on maybe possibly rebuilding this Edelbrock. I'm gonna look and see if there's any videos up already that are the same thing. If there are, I won't bother with it. But I know you guys like these carburetor videos, so if you have any ideas for anything else you'd like me to cover, just let me know, and I'll be glad to do it. So, alright, there we go. Quadrajet, Thermoquad, Edelbrock / Carter AFB, and Holley. Oh, one other thing. This would kind of piss off you guys that believe in this Buy American stuff, which I do too, but this carburetor, this is made by Weber, and I think that's, I don't know where Weber's out of, but it's not this country. That's the Weber. I think it's, well, look, I don't know. Let's all look it up, where Weber carburetors are from, but they make these carburetors. It ain't Carter anymore, and it sure as hell ain't Edelbrock. So, yeah. Yeah, it says Weber USA. Maybe it's made here. It's upside down, but Weber is, they started out someplace else, but they make good carburetors. Alright everybody, I'm going to wrap this up. I got 23 minutes in this thing, so if I hadn't bored you to tears by now, hopefully you'll like the video. And thanks for watching. Subscribe, rate, comment. I like it all. So see you soon.